Good afternoon, welcome to the Clay Studio. I am going to demonstrate how to make lidded jars, and the whole purpose of this lesson is to show how the lid is made, just to get comfortable with using calipers and how to adjust the size of the lid to the other piece. So I'll keep this as simple as I can. If you are new to this process, if you're not familiar with it, and I actually have a group with me right now, so I'm speaking to them as well. It's a review to them, but it may be new to some of you who've never seen this before. So the first thing we're going to do is take the bigger piece. Okay, we have 2 balls of clay, and that's what we're going to focus on first. So just as a review, the wheel needs to be wet before the clay is put on there, so that we can assure ourselves that it sticks. Okay. Be sure that you wiggle it. Be sure that it's securely attached, or else it will fly off. Some of us know what that's like. Okay, this is not a big piece of clay. So it shouldn't require as much strength, but the same idea applies with centering. Okay, you want to rely on the strength from your body weight to get that centered, and not just the strength that's in your arms and your shoulders. Okay, next, be sure that you open it up. Okay, and next we're going to widen it out. Well, let's check the bottom first, be sure that we have enough thickness. I've done this so many times that I'm just not in the habit of doing that anymore. But if you're not sure on how thick it is, just take the needle tool, stick it in the middle, take your finger down as far as it'll go until it touches the clay, and then pull out. And as I can see, that's about 1/4 of an inch thick, which is fine. I wouldn't get it any thinner than that because the clay gets too fragile when it dries. So next we're going to widen it out. Make sure you run your finger over that hole to seal it up. And this is not going to be fancy. I'm not going to focus on how you can form it. Just get it to a cylinder, basically. If you want to make it round, you can. If you just want it straight up and down, you can also leave it that way. Okay. But as usual, be sure that you do the throwing part, okay, by compressing the wall and pulling up. That's going to make the wall thinner and the piece taller. And if your rim is not level, take that needle tool again, come off to the side, cut into it, and then lift the top off. Be sure that you put it into the water because that's going to be recycled later. Okay. Be sure that you clean up the base using a rib. Give it an undercut because it's going to be cut off, and you want that base to be nice and clean and round. And then sponge it. Be sure that it's smooth. there's any water pooled up on the inside, be sure that you sponge that out. Okay, so this is ready to stop. And what I'm going to use next is a caliper. That's what it looks like. And we're going to measure the width of the inside of the piece. Okay? And once we've done that, then we're going to hold it there. It doesn't have to be a specific measurement. You just have to adjust it according to what it's measured as with the calipers, okay? So we're going to set that aside. And I'll borrow this and replace it with another one. And we're going to start again with what's going to be the lid. Now this starts in the same way as I demonstrated with the last piece, with the centering and the throwing and all that. The only difference is we're going to measure the top of it since it's going to be resting inside the rim. So again, be sure that the wheel is wet. Now, what I'm basically doing is making a bowl. Slow it down a little bit. And I'm going to open it up. I'm going to take the caliper, and as you can see, I need to close in on this more because it's too wide. Okay, I still want to close in more at the top. Now I'm only going to focus on the rim, all right? I'm not pushing any more on the rest of the piece. All I'm doing is pushing forward on the rim, all right? And then I'm going to measure it again to see how wide it is, and that's where I want it. So I'm going to keep it there. And I can't do any more to this today since the clay is wet. So I have to allow the clay another day to dry out before I do any trimming and before I add a knob on the other side. And I will show that in a separate clip. But right now I am just cleaning up what I've started. And if, just as I showed earlier, if you need to trim the rim off, if it's not level, do that as well. And that's it for now. Okay? Now, I just wanted to remind you that this will be upside down when it's finished. Okay? I had to turn it this way just to make the rim, and then I'm going to form I'm going to hand form the knob for the other side after I've done some trimming. But it's supposed to fit, if I can get that in view there. It's supposed to fit as shown, all right? That's how you use the calipers to make a lid, and the rest of it is just trim work and any additional detail that you want to add to it, but as far as carving and hand building and that kind of thing. I will point out ahead of time that when you're doing hand building and when you're holding it in your hands doing that, you want to be really careful not to warp it because the lid won't fit on there very well. So you just want to keep it nice and round. So that's it, and stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next clip. So welcome back to the next segment on the lid tutorial. In the last clip, I showed you the wheel throwing process for those beginning stages when the clay was wet. And now that it's been about 24 hours, the clay is harder and it's at the point where I can do some trimming. And I'm just gonna walk you through how to do that with a trim table. Now, I will also mention that I have another video dedicated to trim tables. So please look that up if you want more information on that. But for the sake of this lesson regarding how to make lids and how to get those to fit other pieces, or to make those compatible with the other pieces that they're designed for, I'm mainly going to show you how to trim them up a little bit and how to get them to fit better in case your pieces don't match up very well. If the lids are a little bit too big and it's too tight to fit inside the other piece, you can trim a little bit off your lid to get those to fit how they should. And I'm also going to review how to trim the bases. So that's actually what I'm going to start with. And these trim tables, of course, are designed to turn clockwise and counterclockwise. And when you turn it clockwise, it tightens up, okay? Now, this is not a very big piece, so I didn't need to use the rods for this. I'm only using the clamps. So now it's centered up, and the tool that I'm using, of course, is a ribbon tool, and you can get these with a lot of different ends that are in different shapes for different kinds of detail work as you do your trimming. But just to keep this basic and just to show you how to clean up your base, I'm going to start with the flat end. And I'm going to turn the wheel on, of course, and it doesn't have to be very fast. And you just rest the end of that tool on wherever you're going to do the trimming. Now, I'm not pressing hard. I'm actually holding my hand still. As the wheel is turning, it's doing the work for me. They call them ribbon tools, by the way, because the clay peels away and looks like ribbons as it's doing that, of course. And there's no right or wrong way on how to do the trimming. The most important thing is to just make your bases clean. Okay, you can have a flat bottom, or you can create a foot like that. Also keep in mind that you have to factor in how thin the bottom is, because sometimes you can't afford to take away much if the bottom's too thin. But if the bottom is about half an inch thick or so, then you do have a little bit of wiggle room. So this is also a way to just trim away sharp areas. Okay, so if your base is really sharp on the edge from where it was cut off the wheel, then this is your opportunity to round that off. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And what I also have is a sponge, okay? And I'm just going to get it damp. It doesn't have to be very wet with that being said, I have a bucket of water here, and I'm just gonna smooth down where I made the cuts and where I made the trim. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Now this is also your opportunity to put your name on it. So I'm using a stylus for that. So take time to do that after you have the bottom trimmed. And I'm just gonna, I don't have to do any trim work on the top here since the rim is level, although, and this lesson is not really focused on how to do detail work, but you can use these ribbon tools for just carving out notches, okay? If you wanted to go with that kind of look or aesthetic, and for that matter, you could also do the same thing toward the bottom. Okay, just if you wanted some extra pizzazz for the piece. But again, this lesson is not on how to do detail work. It's just showing you how you can use those ribbon tools. And then just take your damp sponge, again damp, not soaking wet to where water's dripping everywhere. And just smooth all that down, and also on the top. All right, so this is going to be our base piece, and now we're going to focus on the lid. Now this lid is a little bit too tight, so I'm going to have to trim this down just a little bit to get this to fit. And trim off just a little at a time, and then recheck it and put both pieces together just to test it out before you trim too much off. You can always take away, but you can't add back. All right, so that needs a little bit more trimming. Okay, so now these two fit, which is good. So at this point, I'm just gonna smooth down where the rim is. And I'm gonna turn it upside down, and I'm gonna focus on the other side. Now, I'm going to point out something else, and this is my own fault because I let the clay dry a little bit. It's more, in other words, it's more dry than I intended it to be, because my original intention was to put a knob on top. And in future videos, I will show that. But if the clay is too dry, you will not be able to hand build a knob for your piece. But if you were to do that, you would just take a needle tool and just put some score marks there and take a little piece of clay, and of course when the wheel is turned off, and as I have reviewed in the past with slipping and scoring, it's the same in this case. After you've done your scoring in the middle, just put that piece of clay on top and then turn the wheel again, and just blend those pieces together and just take your sponge and smooth those out. But there's also another option for you as far as making a handle. Even when the clay is dry, you could also take a separate piece of clay and allow it to dry, but as you're glazing your piece later, you can just attach it that way with a glaze, okay? The glaze would just fuse those pieces together. So that is what I'm going to do with this piece. Since the clay is more dry than I wanted it to be. But I'm still going to trim this other side and make that separate piece off camera. And I will have another clip in this video that shows that part of the process when it comes time to glaze it for attaching that piece, which will be the knob. All right. So that's what it looks like so far. If your piece is too short, you know, the clamps are at a certain height, so that may hinder some of your trimming if your piece is too small. Just put your base piece back in the center and then put your lid in place and then turn it again and then just continue to trim the lid. I think I want to round off that outer rim on the bottom piece too, just to make it look consistent with the roundness of the lid. Okay, so I'll show you what this looks like now. All right, and that's all it takes. As far as basic as you can get, okay? You can get more detailed with lidded pieces, but I just wanted you to get comfortable and at least have the idea on how to form lids and how to measure them accordingly so that they'll fit the other piece that it's intended to fit. So if you're in class with me today, I will assist you as needed, and I appreciate you tuning in, and I will see you in the next clip when we finish this up. One more thing before we continue with the glazing. I had mentioned early on that the handle is just going to be a knob, and all it takes is a piece of clay about the size of a quarter. So just roll it up, and once you've done that, give it a tap on one side, and that flat end is going to rest on the lid, and that's it. Of course, this has to dry out and be fired separately from your piece, and then glazed, and the glaze is going to be like a glue. It's going to fuse this piece on top, and I will show you how that's done in the next clip. Now, I will also review that this is a good backup plan if your clay dried out too fast or if it dried out too much like this one did. That's one way that you can attach handles, but normally you can slip and score this on the top of your lid when the clay is wet enough. But if it's dry and you weren't able to get a handle on there, this will also work. But I'll show you how it's done in the next clip. Stay tuned. So at this point, the piece has been glazed, and I wanted to save some time by not demonstrating the glazing aspect of it because that just takes longer than I would like. The whole point of this is just to show you how to get this knob to attach to the top. And it's very simple. Once you get the entire piece glazed, you simply reapply the glaze in the place where that knob is going to go. So it's going to be on top like that. And while the glaze is wet, just stick that on top. Now, then you're going to just glaze the knob. Okay, and as usual, as I have demonstrated in the past when it comes to glazing, you want 3 coats on it. So that'll be coat number 2, and that came off. And then just reapply. And the knob will stick to it when the glaze dries, but it will not be all that secure either. It can still pop off. Just be sure that you keep this in place when you fire this in the kiln, or in this case, when I fire this, when it comes time to fire it, I'm just going to set the bottom of the lid face down, and when the firing is complete, when it's finished, the knob will be fused to the top of the lid. And in the next clip, I will show you how that looks when the piece is finished. So stay tuned. So now that the piece is finished, I wanted to show you what it looks like after it's been fired. There's what the glaze looks like. I mainly just wanted to show you what the knob looks like after it's attached. So like I said early on, glaze can be used as a glue or an adhesive to attach a knob in case your clay was too dry for hand building early on in the process. So just take a look at that before we conclude the video for today. And I hope that you found this to be helpful. If you are ever in this situation, this works really well. I prefer to hand build my knobs on, but you can attach them separately like this. All you would need to do is form a small ball of clay, fire it separately, and then when you're glazing, just put them together, okay? And then, of course, paint around the seam so that it's sealed in there good. And now you have a functional piece. So thanks for tuning in to this tutorial on lid forming. And keep in mind that the more you practice, the better you'll get, the more comfortable you'll get with the medium in general. But lid making is its own kind of challenge. So this goes back to as basic as I can make it to be. And if you have any questions going forward, feel free to reach out. Thanks for tuning in.